Hey boys, it's HarmNone. Today, what's going on over Today, we're going to be counting down the top 5 military vehicles in Grand Theft Auto Online Part 2. This list is basically just going to consist of vehicles that have, armor, a weapon system that they have, whether it be a machine gun, a missile launcher, whatever it may be. If you haven't seen Part 1, go check that out. I'd recommend it. This list is only going to consist of land vehicles, just so you guys know. There's not going to be any aircraft on this list. We might do a separate list for aircraft. We're going to see. Stay tuned for that. Let's get into it, starting off with number 5. Alright guys, starting off at number 5, we have the Chernobog. Now this thing is on this list simply because it has a missile launcher and it's a little tiny bit armored. And it's a military vehicle. And those are pretty much the only 3 reasons it's on this list. It's pretty slow, it's not very maneuverable, but it is very cool, I think. And the missile launcher on the back is actually quite good. It's quite good for taking out oppressors and quite good for taking out jets. It's not the best, that's for sure, because it is such a huge target, but for what it is pretty good. This actually has the longest lock-on range in the entire game out of any missile launcher, so that's very cool. So when you actually hop into this thing to use the missile launcher, you will have to first hop into the driver's seat. If you are doing this solo, or whoever is driving, you will have to get into the driver's seat, and on keyboard you press H. This will put down the supports, as you can see, in between the wheels. This will actually enable you to actually fire the missiles from this thing, so we're going to hop inside here, and I'm going to demonstrate this for you guys. So as you guys can see, it has quite a good turning circle. It's actually quite fast to aim it around. I wish I had somebody in my session right now to actually lock onto to demonstrate how far this thing can shoot, but I will shoot missiles. And as you can see, it does shoot a very rapid burst of missiles. It shoots 5. So, whoever you're shooting at is going to have a lot of missiles to deal with, that's for sure. So I think it's pretty good, honestly. These missiles actually have quite a good lock-on them. I believe they are equivalent to the Toreador missiles. If you guys have got a Toreador, you probably know how good that thing is at taking out oppressors. Just imagine the Toreador with more range and shooting 5 missiles instead of only 1 or 2. Anyway guys, I think that's pretty much it for number 5. With that being said, let's move right into number 4. Alright guys, at number 4, we have the Rhino tank. Now, if you haven't seen part 1 of this, you're not going to really understand this because obviously the Conjali is a lot better than the Rhino. That's why this is part 2. Kind of ran out of vehicles to put on this list, so the Rhino is in here just simply for that reason. Obviously, the Rhino actually does have a cannon as well as a machine gun that can be fired from it. However, its armor capabilities are not the greatest. I believe this thing can only take, I think, 3 RPGs before it blows up, whereas the Conjali can take, I believe, 6 or 7. So, the Rhino's kind of got its work cut out for it in this list. With that being said, it is still a tank at the end of the day, and you can still, shoot stuff like that boat over there, although it's actually not doing anything to it. But the cannon does have pretty effective range. It is, better than the average car off the street, that's for sure. And it could actually be a lot worse. Obviously, it does have the cannon. It's got a passenger-mounted machine gun, so the passenger can fire the machine gun. Definitely not the best, definitely not better than some of the other vehicles that are on this list up ahead of this thing, but it is still an effective vehicle, I feel like, nonetheless, even if it's not the most effective anymore. I feel like a Rhino tank, if you're a good driver, you could probably outplay, a Night Shark or an Insurgent Pickup Custom. As long as you're hitting your shots, you're not missing too much. It would be a pretty sketchy fight for you in the Rhino, because this thing is just pretty weak, honestly. In today's climate of GTA Online, if you will. It's pretty hard out here to be driving a Rhino tank when there's oppressors and, hydras everywhere. So anyway guys, with that being said, let's move right into number 3. Alright guys, and at number 3 we have the Barrage. Now the Barrage is not a very good armored vehicle, however it is pretty cool. It does have 2 mounted machine guns on the top of it. You can actually mount the rear one as a grenade launcher, I believe, as well if you wanted to. It can hold, I believe, 4 or 6 people. And it's also quite fast and quite maneuverable, which I really like. Now the Barrage can actually take about 5 rockets from an RPG, or about 12 shots from a homing launcher or from a homing rocket shot by an oppressor. So its armor is actually not even the worst. It's actually surprisingly better than the Rhino tank, which I know is pretty pathetic. The Barrage is actually quite a cool vehicle. I feel like it's super underrated in Grand Theft Auto Online, not only as a military vehicle, but also just as a vehicle to cruise around in general with your friends and actually do some damage. Obviously on the machine guns you're quite exposed, even in the driver's seat you're quite exposed too, but I do feel like the Barrage should get a little more love than it currently gets in Grand Theft Auto Online, that's for sure. It's quite a good off-road vehicle, it's got good suspension travel, it's just overall quite a good vehicle. and I definitely think that people need to start putting some respect on the Barrage's name. Anyways, let's move right into number 2. Alright guys, at number 2 we have the HVY Menacer. Obviously this thing is here because, as you can see, it has a huge machine gun on the top. It's also quite armored, has seating for 4 players, and it is pretty protective. It's overall a pretty good defensive vehicle. It's, you know, okay for offense as well. It's also got these front mounted machine guns that a lot of the time I actually forget about, but they are still there. They're about as good as the Night Sharks, so you know, they're not that great. But this thing is pretty sick actually. It pretty much matches up with the Insurgent Pickup Custom as far as the armor capabilities of it go. The Menacer can survive up to 8 rockets or 19 homing rockets from an oppressor, or 19 explosive rounds from a heavy sniper Mark II. So, you know, its defense is a lot better than the Barrage that I did at number 3. It's also quite a good off-roader, and I feel like it's quite a good vehicle in general. It's definitely not as fast as the Insurgent, I don't think, which kind of does suck, honestly. But it is, you know, a very good off-roader at the end of the day. It is very capable. The gunner, when they're in the gunner seat, actually has, you know, a little bit of protection. They have the shield on the back of it, at least to protect them from behind, which is quite good. It's quite nice to have for sure. I've actually been on the gun of this thing before, and it absolutely shreds. It's very similar to the Insurgent Pickup Custom, just with a little bit less armor and a little less speed, and just overall a little worse performance. But with that being said, the Menacer is still a great vehicle to have in Grand Theft Auto Online. Definitely, I would not be disappointed if I had this instead of an Insurgent. Obviously, the Insurgent is a little better, but the Menacer can still hold its own, I feel like. Anyway guys, let's move right into the vehicle at number 1. Alright guys, at number 1 we have the APC. I'm sure many of you saw this coming if you've seen part 1, because you know this thing was not included in part 1. This thing probably would have been at number 6 if that video was a top 6 video. Now the APC is pretty good. The driver is pretty well protected. When you're actually moving, these armor plates go down over the windows, so you are very hard to be shot at when you're actually driving this thing, or when you're just inside it in general. Of course, the gunner also gets access to the explosive cannon on the top of it. You can also fit the APC with a SAM turret. The SAM turret can shoot 6 missiles, kind of similar to the Chernobog, except obviously shooting 1 more missile. The APC is actually a 4-seater as well, so you can have 2 people sitting in the rear of it, and in the rear you actually get access to 2 gun ports on the back sides of it here. So they can shoot machine guns out of the inside of it while being very well protected from the inside. The APC does have one weak point where it's actually quite weak armor-wise. This thing can take about 4 RPGs to the front and sides. It can be killed with 1 RPG shot to the back, although I don't think I've ever experienced that myself personally, but it is a valid point. It can also drop proximity mines, as you see there, and there, and there, and there, and there. So that's very nice. If you got somebody chasing you, you can drop proximity mines, and if you have a gunner in it with you, you can also have them shooting behind you at whoever's chasing you. Another great feature about the APC, and basically the main reason why it's at number 6, is just because of this. It's actually an aquatic vehicle. So you can hop down into the water here, and as you guys can see, this thing is cruising like a boat. Albeit the APC is quite slow when it's actually in the water, at least it is able to go through the water. I think that that is quite a cool feature. When you're in the driver's seat, you can also switch to the passenger seat by holding H on keyboard. I'm not sure what it is on console. As you guys can see, I've switched to the turret, and it does shoot quite quickly, which is quite good. Now the APC's biggest downfall, like I said, is its lack of armor, and it also is quite a slow vehicle. But I think that the APC's ability to actually travel through the water kind of makes up for its slow speed. I just think that's a really helpful thing to be able to do if you ever need it. Anyway guys, that's pretty much it for this list. If you enjoyed this video, leave a like, if not dislike. Let me know in the comments down below what you thought of the video. Go check out part 1 if you haven't seen it. Subscribe if you guys are new, and I will see you guys in the next video. Until then, take care. Peace.